Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Mavens of Data. We've got a great topic for you today. We're going to be talking about AI and whether or not it's the real deal transforming our industry, or if it's just a bunch of hype. It's the next overhyped cycle. Each of our guests is going to be taking one side of that argument. We've got two amazing guests here for you in Colleen and Lindsay. These are some of the questions that we're going to be getting into throughout the show. I think Colleen, it might be great to start with you and just kind of ground the conversation maybe in the technology. Like, what is different about the AI tech stack than kind of the stack that we're used to as data people for maybe the 10 years that came before it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's actually more than 10 years at this point. So I think a lot about this, probably too much. I need a hobby. But I think about tech stacks a lot because the modern data stack has sort of reigned supreme over the last, let's say 15 years, right? 10, 15 years. And that's really like a cloud and SaaS version of what we've been doing for the past 40 years, where you're literally just taking data, copying it somewhere else because you don't want to do analytics on your main transactional data store, and then curating it so that you can do BI, AI, machine learning, whatever you're going to do to it. But that's like been entirely focused on the structured data world. And it turns out something like 95% of data is unstructured. And so that movement of data, curation, and presenting of it in a BI tool like Tableau or something isn't going to work on unstructured data. Unstructured data is a totally different ballgame. And so you need these like new paradigms and a new infrastructure to really understand that. And so this like modern cloud-based lightweight data stack is based on the idea of OPH, other people's hardware, right? And it's not going to work for AI necessarily. And so while we've had this like evolution of technology based on structured data, now we need to do that same thing for unstructured data. And so we really need to think through that data stack based on like the new and cutting edge problems that we're trying to solve, and also the data volumes. So cloud might work. You might need a hybrid architecture. You might need to have some data in the data center, some data hybrid. And so a lot of our customers, that's what they're doing. They're repatriating, right? They're going back to an on-prem world because that's really how you can operate at that exabyte scale. And so you need to think about the newest compute, you need to think about the newest storage. And so that entire pipeline of data from the source to the value, that whole supply chain of data is going to change based on the new infrastructure. So you need to think about on-prem, you need to think about data storage, you need to think about data compute, and just everything needs to be rethought, which is fun. Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, I think about this a lot, but I do think that people need to like completely rethink how you work at that scale, right? That scale of like exabytes rather than terabytes.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. I'm curious, before we move on from the tech stack, for folks in the audience who might be kind of like beginning stages of their career and are more familiar with structured data, could you give an example, either of you, of like unstructured data and kind of why that's requiring so much more of a lift?
Yeah, I mean, unstructured data, I mean, we're making it right now, right? Like this video is unstructured data. And so, there is structure within it. If you take a transcript and then you tokenize the data, then you've got structured data, right? But if I say something is fire, I could mean, it's really cool. I could mean it's literally on fire. I could mean that somebody lost their job, right? There's like so much context to words that you need to have that sort of structure around it. And there's so much more work and compute that needs to be done to understand that data, rather than traditional structured data of like, what is this invoice amount, right? In the sort of like the structured world that we're used to. And, so there's so much more metadata along with the data that really is going to give it that context. And so it's like that on top of just the sheer volume of data is going to provide the need for having new infrastructure around that data stack and that tech stack.
Yeah, awesome. I think it's a great example to just kind of make it concrete for folks. So let's kind of jump in. Let's jump into the main part of the debate here. I'd love to start with you, Lindsay. What are some of the reasons that you think AI is overhyped? It's not as big as everybody says it's going to be in terms of how it's going to transform our industry.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's. I feel like most of the times it's people are going to fall somewhere in the middle with this argument, and I probably do on most days. But for the sake of today, I think I will share most of the reasons that I'm a little more skeptical. If folks are familiar with Joe Reese and I wrote a blog post and did a podcast about this ourselves probably a couple months ago now. But I think what we're seeing in our industry specifically, and across all industries, is kind of this because of the hype of everything, all of the data tools, all the vendors that are in our space are really just jumping on this trend of, okay, we want to add AI to our product. It's like, what does that actually mean? Like, what are you actually doing? What problem are you solving? And so I kind of feel like we're in this vacuum of everyone thinking like, it's Maslow's hammer. It's like, okay, we want to add new value to our product, so we need to add an AI chatbot, something like that. I just previously worked at a company that did this. And so it's like, basically trying to figure out how can we monopolize? How can we kind of jump on this trend to make as much money as we can from adding these features to our tools? And so I guess my cynical point of view is that, is that really the best way for data teams to start delivering value, is to just start using AI in every single thing that we're doing? I think there are benefits and productivity benefits, but I guess my caution and my cynicism is around, is that really the best solution all the time to all the different problems that we have? There's oftentimes much simpler things that we can be doing than just adding AI to everything. So I think that's probably like the first stab that I will take. That AI is a little bit overhyped, and I think we're actually seeing that come through in the tools that we're using, and they're just focusing on adding AI to everything, and I don't really know if there's that much value in that.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, it's a compelling point to make. We're pursuing the technology and not necessarily the specific problems to solve. Curious, Colleen, what's sort of your opening argument on this one?
I mean, I think that there is creativity and creativity is a really interesting piece of the puzzle that we're just starting to tap. I think ChatGPT is amazing, but I think the bigger reason to me that it's amazing is that it gets us thinking about this next phase in the evolution of computation, right? Like, there have been these like huge game changers that have come along, right? Like, I would say things like the personal computer or mobile computing or cloud computing, right? Like, I think AI is the next step in the evolution of computing. And we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of what we can do. And ChatGPT, yeah, it's cool, but I also make fun of it because every time I ask it to do something, it sounds the same. And I can tell, like, I feel like I can tell anyway. Maybe I can't, but I feel like I can tell when people are using ChatGPT, it just has a feel and a tone to it. It can't quite approximate how a person sounds. But that said, that's just one use of AI, right? Like, I think that the other use cases, we haven't even begun to scratch the surface. And so this is things like, we've got people using it for cancer detection and custom drug design. And I saw something online about AI-powered toothbrushes. Whether or not that comes to fruition, we'll see. But, there are people working on these things. And I think, in healthcare alone, there is just an absolute explosion of new technologies that are coming out of AI and LLMs and computer vision and all of these things when you combine them, right? And it's not about folks, losing their jobs to AI necessarily, but like Lindsay said, like, I do think that we're going to make our lives better, right? And we're going to actually change humankind. And there's there's things I saw about like cargo planning and route optimization that AI can make these advances in how we move goods around the world, right? And I do think that that's the kind of thing that we need to be using AI for. Like, Chatbots, sure. Like I think we could all agree that there's certain limitations there, but I do think that as far as the use cases though, we've only begun to scratch the surface.
Yeah. Yeah, really interesting. So I'm wondering, Colleen, when we're framing this as AI, a lot of times today that's sort of become synonymous with LLMs. Are you thinking more of like machine learning type of applications, like sort of separate from LLMs? Like, yeah, curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, like I definitely think there is a whole world of artificial intelligence, and machine learning was sort of the thing that we were able to wrap our brains around 10 or 15 years ago, right? And that was a boom. And then there was a boom before that. And then this latest one is focused on LLMs because now we have the compute and we have the capability to do this. Who knows what the next one will be. But I do think that with every one of these booms and with every one of these like leaps forward in the technology, we're able to do more and more. And, where the next one will take us, who knows, right? But like, I do think that LLMs and the ability to do generative AI is really a huge step forward for us, right? And that's where we're getting a lot of these advances in technology and civilization in a lot of ways.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Lindsay, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on some of like the limitations of the new AI. Like, in which use cases does it really fall short, where you still really need that special human sauce that we have? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking, Colin, as you were talking there, to me that feels like the big difference with this wave is that it's like for the first time, AI is more interfacing with like modern, like the mass society for the first time. Like I think the previous sort of waves, it was like a little bit more contained. I think we're kind of at this point now where, because we do have things like ChatGPT and people could just sign up for a free account, now it's like anybody can just go and use this. And so I kind of feel like that is really interesting in a lot of ways, and it's now very, very topical. Everyone's talking about it. At least, depending. I went to a wedding in Canada. I went to Northern Canada. No one's talking about AI there. So
What?
we are still a little bit in the bubble. Yeah, we are still a little bit in the bubble that we think everyone's talking about AI, but some people aren't, but most people are. And I think that's the big difference, is that now it's kind of like, the internet and social media. Like everyone was like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's going to change the world. It's going to do all these amazing things for us. But it also does horrible things. It also has led to, terrible things happening. And so I think that on the more negative side of things, I think that is something that happens when you release something to the masses without governance, without guidance on what should this be used for. And so I think that, yes, generative AI is really good for creative things, to a degree. I still think like, is AI generated art as valuable as art that's generated by a human? That's like an existential philosophical thing that we can talk about. But for data folks specifically, the work that we need to do is often based in actuality and accuracy and things being very high quality. And I think those are the things that generative AI specifically is not very good at. And so I think that, you're seeing a lot of data companies trying to push the bounds of that and saying, oh, you can fire all your data analysts because now our tool will just write SQL for you, and a business person can just go and have all their questions answered by this tool. I've seen firsthand that doesn't work. It really doesn't work. And it will give you an answer very confidently. Yep. And it will say, that you're basically going to be able to just fire your data team. And I think, I think the article that Joe Reese and I wrote was eloquently named "F around and find out," and that was really the kind of impetus of like, I think that data teams are gonna, and that businesses are gonna find that if they do lean fully in replacing data teams with something like generative AI, I think they're unfortunately going to find out that that's not really something that we can do. I don't know if we're ever going to get there, because I do really think that understand, until you have AI that can actually reason and kind of think in the ways that think. That's different. That's not what generative AI is doing. Generative AI is just taking an input and generating out what we think is desired from the prompt based on past data, and that's really not what human cognition is doing, in my opinion. So,
right, yeah. But don't you think we have to start somewhere? I mean, we have to start with this, right, and see what we can do. And I mean, do you think that people are smart enough to understand that when Google tells you to eat rocks, you shouldn't actually eat rocks?
I would hope so, but I think
I mean,
we've
I
seen
knew
some
that.
crazy, yeah, we've seen some crazy things happen though, like even with social media being used to swing elections. Like there's arguments there that hopefully people would be smarter than what they're seeing on the internet to make decisions for themselves. But I think a lot of times that people, we don't really know how people are going to act, and so I think there's a lot of ethics and things wrapped up into that we're moving so quickly that I think we're moving ahead of the ability to really maintain some of this stuff. But
Maybe.
Yeah, Colleen, I'm curious. With Lindsay putting out some of the risks, I'm curious. What do you think about regulation of AI? Like, you probably know where it is now better than I do, and like, where do you think it should be, and where do you think it's heading?
So here's the thing about AI. Unlike structured data, it's a black box, right? Like it's going to be very challenging to say, okay, how did we get this answer? Right? Like you're not going to be able to walk back through a data lineage chart and say, oh, well, this is where the answer came from. Because the answers are contextualized in a way that they're not with traditional analytics. So I think that regulation, obviously we need to govern everything and we need to be able to, say, here's my confidence level on whether you should eat rocks or not. Probably shouldn't, but it's an answer and I'm giving it to you. So I think there's like a level of regulation that we need to provide and we need to all agree on what that looks like. And I think that the challenge is that it comes from governments, right? Like no company is going to be like, yeah, we're going to regulate ourselves and we're going to tell you how we're regulating ourselves, because that's not something they're going to do. So it's going to come from governments, and governments, unfortunately, are made up of people who don't really understand AI. And so I think that we're at an interesting inflection point, and, not to get into politics, but I think that hopefully we will have folks in office who are smart enough to say, let's find some people like Lindsay and Colleen and John who are asking the right questions, right? So that people can make the right decisions for themselves with computers. And I'm kind of skirting around the question, but I will say that the technology is moving so fast that the regulation can't keep up, right? And so I think that people who are building these systems need to be cognizant of that and need to assume that they're going to be regulated. And when they build the systems, they have to have an eye on where that regulation will be.
Yeah.
So,
you did. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say you did skirt around the question about politics, like a good politician. Yeah, maybe you're that leader that we need. So.
Kellyanne Conway.
Lindsay, didn't mean to cut you off.
No, all good. Yeah, I'll just kind of add to that too. Like, I think it's good for folks on the call listening and businesses out there to kind of think about the companies that you are giving access to your data. Like, they might be passing SOC 2 compliance, they might be getting all these regulations, and they still may be naive about how, integrating something like OpenAI into your product could potentially leak your information. So there's kind of two camps where, like, there's malicious risk where people are actually trying to, figure out ways to get access to data and use it in a malicious way. And then there's like naive risk. It's like people don't actually know what they don't know. And I think that second bucket is actually much bigger than we probably realize, is that a lot of these data companies who previously had SOC 2 compliance and now are adding these products to their tools, like some of that regulation around SOC 2, as far as I know, hasn't even caught up to AI either. And so if now a tool has access to, all of the tools in your tech stack or data, or it can read the data in your warehouse, and it's sending that information to OpenAI, and OpenAI has access, that could go anywhere. Like, we don't really know. And like, data breaches are not something that we're unfamiliar with. So what happens if OpenAI has a data breach of some kind? Like, that would be catastrophic. And so I think those are the kind of things where, when folks are deciding which companies to engage with, you really want to try to go with folks who are, doing the most that they can, but also understanding that there's still this really big naive piece of the puzzle of people who don't really know the risk that they're opening themselves up to. So that's one thing that I would definitely keep in mind. And especially now, I work in a very highly regulated environment now. So it's, kind of seeing what it was like to work at a data company where, they're kind of adding things very quickly. And there might not be kind of second thoughts about that to highly regulated industries where they're kind of, they are very much like, no, we're not going to be using AI because we don't want to take that risk.
Awesome. I want to pose a question probably to both of you. So, Lindsay, you brought up in your F Around and Find Out article that, companies, they're kind of kicking the tires with this idea of replace the data department with an LLM and ask it data questions, right? That's sort of the idea of somebody maybe someday, or maybe we're there already, creating an analyst in a bottle product that like replaces the need for a data person. I think, you've got your position that we're not there yet. On the other hand, it's like, if somebody could solve that, like think about the money, the value, from replacing people like me, that just getting that off the books for companies, it's a huge cost saving. So from like a technology VC standpoint, it's an incredible problem to potentially solve. Colleen, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like, do you think that is ever going to get solved? Is it a solvable problem, the analyst in a bottle?
I think it is. Yes. I do think, maybe we're not quite there yet, but I do think that,
Yeah.
I mean, for the sake of the debate, I'm going to say yes, but I do think we're getting there. Right. And that we have to keep iterating on this, right? We need to keep thinking about, what can we do today? How do we need to build the next best thing, right? Because I do think that there are a lot of tools out there that are jumping right to the fire all your analysts. And I don't think that's where we are yet. I think that we are pivoting, though, to make the analysts more business focused, because I think a lot of the work that we do as data folks can be automated and can be streamlined in a lot of ways. And if we can get to that point, then we can focus more on sort of the secret sauce of a specific business, because each company is hiring data analysts because ultimately they want to get interesting and proprietary information out of their data, right? And that's why we're doing this, is because we want to run our businesses with data. And so the way of doing that is to try to automate all the things that are generic and focus on the things that are specific. And so I think that if we get closer to that, we can start to worry less about data and worry more about the business logic and the business analysis as opposed to the data analysis. So that's the holy grail in my mind.
Cool. Yeah, it's a great framework. Lindsay, how about you? So we know you think we're definitely not there yet. Do you think, like, is there any path there? Is there like some wall that we're always going to hit that, the human will always be needed, even 20 years down the road?
Yeah, I mean, I think even though Colleen and I are on the opposite ends of this argument, I think we're actually in agreement on that. Like, I don't think it's necessarily, I think the whole idea of like replacing a data analyst is like misconstrued. It's like, what is the role of a data analyst? What is the actual role of the data team? Like, it's not just technical skills. It's not just writing code. It's oftentimes understanding the business and understanding how what is the growth model of the business? How does the business actually work? And I think sometimes the business doesn't even know that. So if the business doesn't know it, how can you tell AI to do that for you? Yes, I'm sure that it can creatively help you come up with that and start to figure out, what might my business model look like? And I think we're seeing more and more work now with things like metrics trees and templating your metrics and understanding your business model to be able to kind of like take all your data sources and just feed them in and get all the metrics out on the other side. I think that all is like, that stuff is definitely probably templatable, things that we can start to automate and do a lot more, probably with AI, or even you might not even need AI to do some of that. But I think, as Colleen said, like, it's going to change the role of the data analyst. It's going to make that person a lot more business focused. Like, you really do have to understand the business. And I think those are more of the like human aspects of things in my mind. That's kind of like the creative side of things. It's like understanding the industry, understanding all of the different external factors and like what is going to impact your business. And so that stuff to me kind of always feels like it might be a little more human. But again, I think we're in very early stages. So who knows? Maybe I will be proved wrong in the next couple of years.
Awesome. Yeah, love to hear you guys kind of in agreement on that one. And I'm curious, since kind of both on the same page, that there's definitely some value and it could maybe augment some of the tasks and maybe just the role changes a little bit. If we could kind of shift topic a little bit for folks in the audience, if they want to learn about how to use AI today, what do you think are some of the best places that that somebody can go to learn about AI? Is it podcasts, books, like any good recommendations?
I think it depends what they want to learn, right? Like if you're interested in learning about the models themselves, like there are probably 20 people in the world who really understand the models. But, you could go to Hugging Face and you can look at some of the stuff there. There's a lot of materials on there. I did just talk to someone last week who was like, I wanted to learn more about AI. So I asked AI and I was like, okay, that's kind of awesome. They went and ChatGPT and were like, I want to learn about AI. I'm interested in, and they listed like 4 different things, and ChatGPT came up with a program for them, a curriculum, if you will. So I think that's a really meta option if you're interested. There are a lot of good podcasts out there. I was on Noah Kravitz's podcast, and I think he does just an excellent job. He does the NVIDIA podcast. There's a lot of good conferences. There's the MLOps community has a great conference. I think it's actually next week. And so, like Lindsay said, everyone is talking about this, even people in Northern Canada, even though she didn't hear them. But, I think everyone's interested, right? Because I was talking to my parents' neighbor, like an 80-year-old woman who's just like terrified of AI. And I was like, well, why are you scared? Like, what do you mean? And turns out she's terrified of the grocery store robots because she thinks they follow her. And it's like, okay, well, that's not what we're talking about, but I can understand why that's a little freaky because apparently one of them tried to escape recently. Should Google it. But, I think that there's definitely like different aspects of learning about AI. And so it kind of depends if you're interested in the modeling, if you're interested in the data pipelines, which I think is the fun part. If you're interested in the regulation, there's like a lot out there right now. If you look into like what the Biden administration is putting out there about the like zero trust environments and things like that.
Very cool. Lindsay, how about you? Anything to add to build on that?
I think Colleen did a great job of kind of covering over the AI stuff. I would encourage folks to, if you want to continue to be in the spaces, like still focus on the fundamentals about data, like how to properly build data engineering pipelines and get clean data sources and build the foundations, because that is everything that AI is dependent on. And so while I think there's a lot of fear and concern of like, oh, I'm going to be replaced, it's like there are a lot of fundamental data skills that don't go away. Like AI still needs clean data, it needs accurate data, it needs data that's timely. All of those things are incredibly important. So I guess I would encourage people to like don't lose sight of that, like don't lose sight of the fundamentals, and don't lean too hard on AI when you're trying to learn something new. Like I know for me, it's like, yeah, it's a nice crutch. It's really helpful to like write boilerplate code, but if you're in the midst of like learning, some basic things about code and writing good code, it's like you want to be able to understand the output that's ChatGPT or something is giving you. Like if you're just getting it to write all your code for you, you're probably going to have a bad time because you're going to miss edge cases. You're going to miss little things here and there. So I would just encourage folks, especially the earlier that you're starting, is like, don't lean too hard on that.
Yeah, really. I think really good advice. Awesome. So I think this might be a great time to jump into audience Q&A. So if folks, if you can throw us some more questions on that questions tab, that would be great. Before we get into that, would love to give folks an opportunity to learn more from you. Maybe Lindsay, if you want to start, like where can folks get more information from you, and we can drop links in the chat here too.
Yeah, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I'm usually posting on there or doing events like this. So check out my profile and would love to connect. And I also do a podcast. So Women Lead Data. I've been not as active with that as I have been in the past, but I'm trying to get some more episodes out soon. So yeah, check Women Lead Data. It's on Spotify, Apple Music, all the different podcasts. And then I also teach a course on DBT. So if there's folks wanting to advance their DBT skills, I teach a course on advanced DBT. We're actually in the middle of cohort right now, but we try to do it every like 6 months or so, and that's with Uplimit.
And Colleen, how about you? Where can folks find out more about you?
Yeah, I am also on LinkedIn. Lindsay and I often, hype each other up or make fun of each other on LinkedIn. So yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out. I'd love to meet more people. I don't have any specific links. I love Lindsay's podcast though, so I would like second the link for that. And then I just came out with an ebook about optimizing AI strategy in the modern data landscape. So basically talking about in more depth about the infrastructure differences and sort of the strategic differences between a BI strategy and an AI strategy. And so what that means for, a more forward thinking infrastructure and architecture paradigm.
Awesome. So. And with that, let's jump into some of these questions. So this one, I think this is a great question from Julan. At 45, can I switch from another domain and into data analytics? No way, right? I'm sure you guys are going to say no chance, right? Yeah.
No, 44 is the cutoff. Sorry. I am older than 45. So yes, you absolutely can, although I've been doing this for a while. But yeah, it's never too late, man.
Yeah. Kelly's going to be on in a couple of weeks. Kelly Adams has been on my podcast. Actually, Colleen has as well. So check out both episodes. But Kelly is an amazing person to talk about switching into data analytics. She's got just like an awesome blog, an amazing profile of how she did that. She was on another career path, switched over in like the last year or so, I think. And she's just kind of got like a playbook of how she did it. And so, yeah, if you're looking to, I'll see if I can find the link to her blog, and I'll post that in the chat.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And Lindsay and I didn't start in this field either. Like, to be clear,
No.
like I started in physics.
Mm-hmm. I started in psychology. So
Awesome. Yeah. There's a ton of people that switch later in their career. I think people get worried about the age. I think the flip side of that is like you've got some experience that like a 22-year-old person doesn't have. You've worked in the team environment. You are probably used to presenting things. You probably understand how a business works or an organization works. So, lean on your strengths is what I would say. You might have some specific domain knowledge you could use. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You should go for it. It's a really fun career. And no, 45 isn't even close to too old. So,
well, and so much of it too is general business and like logic. It's not like, yes, you should probably learn the tools and things like that. But, so much of it is asking the right questions and understanding the answers you get.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I would argue that oftentimes like the best analysts and data people that I've seen often are the ones who don't start in data because they come at it from, they've started in product or they started in marketing or they did something else first where they really got the domain knowledge, understood the business, and then learned the technical skills. So I'm pretty, I push pretty hard that learning technical skills, not to trivialize the difficulty of that. It can still be very difficult, but I think learning the business is harder, and just having that business mindset, it's very easy to get deep in the weeds of data and lose sight of what you're doing and why it matters. So I would argue that learning the technical skills is sometimes a little bit easier.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about like if you guys thought about the most technically talented people that you've worked with and the most effective data professionals you work with that have caused like the biggest improvement to an organization, at least for me, I sort of, there's some overlap for sure, but it's definitely not a perfect overlap. Like there's sometimes not you have to have some technical skills, but sometimes not necessarily the most quantitative, like really, really technical person doesn't have the most impact. Like, is that what you guys have found as well, John?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely overlap, like you said, but I think even the most technical folks or the most technically adept folks, the reason that they're so good is because they're using technology to ask the right questions after they've done all the communication work. And then they understand how to effectively communicate the answers, right? Like so much of it, I mean, the model is such a tiny piece of the entire pipeline of data, right? Like so much of that is understanding the business, and communication is such a key to that. So yeah, I would totally agree.
Awesome.
Yeah, me too. I think there's so I'll just add that I think when you build a team, like you want to have both. You don't want to have just someone who's really technically proficient and then people who understand the business. I think nobody's good at everything and everybody's good at something. So I think that's where you kind of like build your strengths in your teams for sure.
Awesome. Here's another one from Philippe. So do you have a litmus test for spotting when AI isn't the right tool for the job? So you don't end up using a hammer when the problem isn't really a nail. Super interesting one here.
I'm going to let Lindsay take this. I feel like she has an answer at the ready.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have like a litmus test necessarily, but I think it just goes back to problem statement definition. It's like what really is the problem that we're trying to solve, and then going through solutioning. And I think that oftentimes everybody's just jumping to the solution. It's like, oh, we want to use AI for this, or we want to, they don't even know what this is. It's just like, we want to use AI. We want to do this cool new thing. I think there's place for that. Like there's definitely creative projects that you can do and things that you can do that are sometimes fun and opportunities to learn how to use a new technology. But yeah, I hear too often too many businesses are like, oh, our CEO is so interested in using AI and how we're going to start using AI. It's like, well, for what? Like, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? And I think that is really just that problem statement and definition is something that a lot of data teams skip. And I think there's a reason is that the business comes to you often with, we want a solution. Here's the solution we want. They don't necessarily bring you along in what the problem is. And that's where the soft skills are very important as a data person to get to the question behind the question, understand the business, understand what the actual problem is, and then you can make a good recommendation about the best solution. And typically it's like, try to find the simplest solution is often the best. AI is not necessarily always the simplest solution.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. It kind of feels like we've been here before. Like I remember like 10 years ago, I remember a boss saying to me, oh, John, we'll just do some data science on it. And me thinking like, this is totally not an applicable problem for that. Like it almost feels like you don't even know the terminology we're talking about. And you're expecting me to just do some magic, but like, and sometimes it feels like that.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of folks these days are, a lot of folks these days are getting told, okay, like the board says we need to do AI. We're changing our domain to .ai. It's like, to do what? Like, what are we doing with it? And so I think, rather than AI washing things, it's rather than using, figuring out what the solution is, like Lindsay said, like, don't solutioneer, like, look at the problems you're trying to solve. And then like, can AI help you? Like, look at your hardest problems. Probably can, but yeah.
Yeah. And then there are some good applications for it. Like a bunch of folks put in the chat earlier, like coming up with an Excel formula or a recipe, if you're trying to do something typically pretty good, especially if you have the foundational skills to check the work, like Lindsay was saying, and you can assess whether it's right or not. Same thing, like if you needed a DAX query for Power BI. What other things have folks put in here? I use it a lot for like brainstorming ideas, where it's a good thinking partner, where I can take the ideas and I can go through and say, yeah, I like that one. That one's terrible. There's no wrong answer. It can be pretty effective. So yeah, there are some that I think are pretty good. There was some good questions in here. I don't see it now, but I'm curious. There was a specific one. What do you think about Microsoft Fabric? I personally am not really a big Fabric user. Do either of you have strong opinions?
I do have an opinion. I don't know how strong it is. So I think that as part of the infrastructure, paradigm that we're moving from this world where we've got this very composable data stack, right? Like it's flexible, it's composable, and that's awesome. But it's also a hindrance because, you've got, if you've seen the MAD data diagram from Matt Turk, there's like thousands of different data tools out there, and it's overwhelming. And also like, they don't all play well together, right? Like we've made a problem. And so I do think that we need to go to something that, still provides you with the flexibility, but doesn't give you overwhelming options, right? Like that takes care of some of the common things. And so I think that's Microsoft's answer to it. And I think it's valid. And in a lot of cases, if you are a Microsoft shop, like it's not a bad idea. I've been at startups where, Gmail all the way, right? So we're not going to be using some big platform like that. But that said, I do think that there's this balance between that composability and the one platform for everything, that you need to sort of look at the problems you're trying to solve and see where that balance lies for your organization. I think that there are a lot of very advanced technologies out there that may not be making their way into the certain, hyperscalers environments. the way they could. But, you know, I also work for a vendor, so I'll stop talking.
Yeah, I think it's also like people focus so much on, like, people are like, oh, we're a Microsoft shop, oh, we're a Snowflake shop, oh, we're we're a GCP shop. It's like, no, you're not. You're a business. You're a business that has a tech decisions that you've made. And when you focus so heavily on, like, we're going to go so far down this route, I think it actually is a hindrance to the business, because then you reduce your ability to have switching costs. And that is, like, we have the opposite of a monopoly in this industry.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you should use that to your advantage. You don't want to be switching tools all the time, but you want to be picking, what works best for you, and then trying to figure out what tools work best together. And I think that is the challenge, right? Of, like, if you do go a full vendor, like, lock-in type of situation, things should work really well together. But then if you ever get to a situation where you don't like that vendor anymore, it's going to be a huge effort to migrate to something else.
Limited,
so yeah, it's kind of nice to have one foot out the door, I think.
Yeah, smart. This is another good question from Philippe. So really great the way this question's worded. What's the most intriguing low-hanging fruit you've seen AI pluck in the business world beyond the everyday boosts that people talk about, like the productivity gains in faster coding and business communication? Like, other than that, like generating the SQL, the Python script, whatever else, anything else come to mind as like a knockout?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm in Boston. We have a ton of pharma here. So, like, for me, the talks I've seen about the drug discovery and all of the healthcare advances that are coming out of generative AI is just mind blowing. It's incredible what we can do. And I'm really excited for that, right? Like, I just think that's going to be really game changing. Like, people are going to live longer because of this, right? And I think they're going to have better lives. And so I think, for me, that's what I look at. And I'm like, I wouldn't call that low hanging fruit, but, like, it's kind of a no brainer to put our efforts into that, right? Because that has such
a problem to solve,
effect, right? Yeah. Like, I'm a data nerd, but they're like saving lives with AI. So
yeah. I feel like, because this is like a polarizing argument, I will say on the flip side, like, I feel like because the business world is so focused on AI, to use AI for anything, I feel like just to mention one more risk that we didn't really talk about, is like the environmental impact of AI. I don't even think we fully understand that yet. And everyone in the business world is so far removed from it. So for me, it's almost like, yeah, let's concentrate where we are using AI to the highest value things, like that, like pharma, like saving lives, those types of things, and reduce the amount that we're using it for just, everyday productivity is great, but if everyone starts doing that, and we start using it, like the energy and the water usage that goes into this, we're kind of like undoing some of the things that we've started to make progress in on climate change, and that's pretty terrifying. Like, it's amazing to be able to help individuals and help people live longer, but, like, at what cost? If we're not focusing AI just on that, and we're focusing on the masses and just using it for anything, there could be, some pretty drastic consequences of that we don't even really fully understand yet.
Yeah. Wow. What a good couple of arguments from our debaters here. Saving human lives and extending them versus saving the planet. I mean, you guys are some heavy hitters right now in this debate. Here's another one from Kay. How do you enable staff to use AI while also ensuring security and data privacy for your company? I feel like we're going to have some really good answers from you too.
Yeah, that's a really good question. In my mind, it's all about education, right? Like, you don't want people just blindly using tools because they can, right? And so there's like guardrails you want to put around these things, but you also want people to understand why there's guardrails, right? Like, we're going to allow you to use Copilot, but we don't want you using this other random site that somebody stumbled across, right? Like, we want to make sure that you want to help people. We want to enable them because they're going to do that regardless. But you want to make sure that, you have very clear SOPs and guidelines around security and data privacy. And, like, maybe don't put people's PII into a ChatGPT query,
Yeah, I think I definitely, the people and the process is very important, but I also think it's just enforcement. Like, just don't give these tools access to things that you can't afford to have go anywhere else. And I think that goes with people as well. Like, if there is a person who has to have access to certain types of data, and you don't want AI to have access to that, then that person shouldn't be able to use that tool. Like it just needs to, I think it's more of an enforcement thing because humans make mistakes, humans forget at the best of times, and then at the worst of times they do malicious things. So I think it's just don't allow it to happen. Like, you know, if you have sensitive data, don't bring it into an environment that a tool has access to. Really just kind of, I think it's as strict as you can be around some of this stuff.
Yeah, same old principles that we've had in the pre-AI world, you know, should apply. Very smart. Yeah. Cool. This one's from Grace, and we'll still have time for a few more, I think. So, what data or business skills can analysts work on to stay relevant and competitive in this future that's trying to take our jobs away from us? So, whether or not we think the jobs are trying to be taken away, what skills do you think would be really smart for people to focus on to stay relevant right now?
One thing that I kind of have been going back to a lot more recently is kind of like learning the growth model of your business. And I think that is, again, something that sometimes like the CEO should know that, but sometimes they don't even really understand like how does the business actually function, and even just documenting that with a metrics tree or something and being able to understand, you know, this is how the business makes revenue. This is how revenue is broken down by subcomponents. Like if you're a SaaS business, you make revenue by having customers and charging those customers a certain amount. And then you can break those things down into smaller components to understand the business. And I don't think enough data people understand the fundamentals of how a business works. They just focus on the data and the metrics. And without knowing, you know, why is this metric important? If this metric goes up, how does that affect other things in the business? And how does that come down to the bottom line? When you start talking like that and you start interacting like that with stakeholders in the business, you're going to have totally different conversations. So I think it goes to communication, business understanding, and those things are oftentimes like, even, you know, I've considered taking an MBA because I think just being able to understand like those types of business skills are really what can set data people apart. All that being said, I think I've said it before, but I'll say it again, like understanding the fundamentals of data engineering and like how to actually, you know, build high quality data pipelines, data modeling, those types of things are like critically important. That, you know, there are probably going to be AI helpers along the way, but I'm still pretty confident that, you know, AI is not going to be able to do all of that stuff, and at least in one model. It's going to be lots of different models that replace us.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. I do think that the business knowledge is what is the key to anybody's success in this. Like, I had somebody early on in my career who, like, in a throwaway comment was like, well, the data doesn't matter as much as the business. And I was kind of like, what is he talking about? And then over the years, I've marinated on it and I've realized, you know, it was very wise, right? Like, none of this matters if we're not ultimately benefiting the business, right? So
yeah, and we all kind of as data pros, I think the first step is always just like getting the basics of like, how do I get the data out? But then at some point, Lindsay, like you said, you start to be thinking about the business first, and that's when you start to be perceived as a partner in the business to your partners, and not just like a data gopher that's, hey, get me this number, this metric, create this report. You're actually like a trusted partner and advisor, and I think that's a huge piece of it. Let's see what else. We've got a couple more questions in here. I think I want to make sure I get to everybody. Man, Philippe, I keep going back to Philippe's questions, but they're really good questions. Will business analysts or data analysts turn into solution architects, AI performance scouts, change maestros, orchestrating the design, evaluation, and smooth adoption of AI-driven solutions? I feel like Colleen's going to have a very strong opinion on this one, most likely.
I mean, everything other than the solution architect there can be automated, right? And that's sort of where I would land, is that like all of that orchestration, evaluation, like all of that should be automated. And so the change, the adoption, the solutioning, that's all the people stuff, right? That's the stuff that we can't automate. And so, yeah, I think business analysts, I think the roles will change as a result of this, because a lot of the like grunt work will now be able to be handed off to automation, whether it's AI or something else, right? Well, they're under some umbrella term of AI. And so I think that's the goal, though, is to really like change how we spend our time. right? Like it's not to get rid of us, but it's to change how we spend our time and really make human intelligence the key rather than like repetitive work that we can hand off.
Awesome. Anything to add on that one, Lindsay, or pretty well?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's. I was thinking of this talk that Sadie St. Lawrence gave at Data Connect conference in July. She was one of the keynote speakers, and her whole topic was like becoming the orchestrator. So with AI, it's like people will become the orchestrators of AI, and so it's thinking a little bit more about, how do you interact with these tools? It's not necessarily to be replaced by them, but to take over some of these more. The middle person, the human in the loop type of stuff. So yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely an opportunity for business analysts to start focusing a little bit more on even the data about their own work. So that's something that I'm kind of really interested in, is like the metadata about how a data stack functions and where the performance is there. And I think if we can start to collect more of that information, we can start to use AI to automate more of our processes, and then kind of like bringing you up again a level to have more time to focus on the business.
Awesome. Yeah, a comment from Nadine. She said this was a really good show. I would echo that. I think folks are probably about to drop off. We're pretty much at time. Colleen, Lindsay, you two have been amazing here. Unfortunately, I'm still on the fence. Both of the arguments were so compelling. Can't tell where the future is going to go, but I think folks should be paying attention to this. They should be learning how to use it. I don't know. I'm a little scared for the future, but I also feel a little bit safe. So you both did a great job. And to everybody in the audience, thank you all so much. We hope to see you on another show.
Thanks
so much for having us.
Thanks for coming.
Take care,
everyone.